brick house, but you might be standing in your yard or sitting in your living room. You might be in Arizona, you might be in Alaska or Oregon, you might even be in Australia, but together we are a neighborhood. And wherever we are gathered, it's a beautiful day. My name is Fred Wooden. I am your interim minister for the Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation and the whole community that is comprised of those people and their friends and neighbors and children. We gather weekly in this way because we can't gather in any other way, but we have grown richer by gathering in this way, realizing that the whole world is our neighborhood, and wherever we are together. And so, to signify that the time we share together is special, I'm going to ask Barbara Face, our worship associate, to lead us in our ritual of kindling the flame.
Good morning. As Reverend Wooden said, my name is Barbara, and I'm honored to be the lay presence in our virtual pulpit today. Please join me in saying our chalice lighting word blessing. You are also invited to light your own chalice as I light mine. We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love which calls us to work for justice.
Good morning, everyone. I am Marcy Bodwin, your Director of Faith Formation here at Valley UU. Wanted to share with you that our much respected and appreciated Faith Formation Assistant, Haley Wynn, has decided that she needs a leave of absence this summer. So we won't be seeing Haley this summer. We're hoping that she gets all caught up with her schoolwork. She is in an intensive MSW program at ASU, and that she'll be able to rejoin us in the fall. Fingers crossed, everyone. We'd love to have her back. But now is the time for our Time for All Ages. If you have children in the household, you want to bring them in front of your screen. Quick note that our pastoral associate today is Janet Cantley. You can reach them by contacting pastoralcare@vuu.org, or you can also use the chat feature below in Zoom. Look for Janet's name alphabetically. Please remember that chat is restricted during the prayer meditation time and also the sermon, but feel free to chat and post your joys and concerns before or after those parts of the service. So our book today, Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World, is inspired by real-life events. This is an honest, intimate look at one family's response to racism and gun violence. I'll put the title and the author in the chat because this book includes a discussion guide created by the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville. It is a multicultural center and museum committed to promoting respect, hope, and understanding. And a portion of the publisher's sales proceeds will be donated to nonprofit organizations that facilitate the empowerment of Black communities. It's a powerful story. I hope you enjoy it.
For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World by Michael W. Waters, illustrated by Keisha Morris. May I grow locks, Dad? Asked Jeremiah. Sure, said his father. You still need to comb your hair every day until it gets long enough, said Mom. I promise I will, said Jeremiah. I can't wait to see my new locks. Maybe next week. His parents chuckled. It will take longer than that, said Dad. But just wait and believe. One day it will happen. A few days later, Jeremiah saw a picture on his dad's computer. Who's that? He asked. What did he do? That's Trayvon Martin, said Dad. He was a young man walking home from the store. He didn't do anything. Still, someone hurt him and he died. Dad shook his head. It doesn't make sense. Jeremiah agreed, but he didn't want to talk anymore. One day, much later, Jeremiah asked, Dad, who's that on TV? Why is he lying in the middle of the street? That's Michael Brown, said Dad. He was 18 years old and on his way to college. He was hurt very badly, and he died. A new image appeared on the screen. Many people say he had his hands raised when he was shot. Those people are on TV, marching to remind us. Jeremiah didn't understand. Why would somebody shoot someone who just has his hands in the air? It doesn't make sense, Dad said. Not at all. But Jeremiah didn't want to talk anymore. Did you hear that? Jeremiah asked one evening. It sounded like gunshots. I heard it, Dad said, and I'm going to see what's going on. Oh, no, you aren't, said Mom. Call 911 and stay here with us. Mom and Dad guided Jeremiah and his sisters, Hope and Liberty, away from the windows and into the hallway. Why are they shooting? Asked Jeremiah. I don't know, son, said Mom, but we're safe in here. Jeremiah didn't want to talk anymore. The family stayed in the hallway for a long time, and he and his sisters drifted off to sleep in their parents' arms. We will never forget. Jeremiah read the words from his dad's newspaper one morning. Forget what? These people were at Bible study at Mother Emanuel AME Church in South Carolina, Dad answered. A young man came in and studied with them, but then he started shooting. The people who died are called the Charleston Nine. AME? Just like our church. But why would anyone want to do that at church? Asked Jeremiah. Why did he shoot them? Because of the color of their skin, said Dad. Because they were black? That doesn't make any sense, said Jeremiah. No, it does not make any sense at all, said Dad. But Jeremiah didn't want to talk anymore. Where were you? Jeremiah said when Dad came home after a long day away. I was worried. I'm sorry, son, said Dad. I was invited to speak at the rally and the march for the two men who were killed by police officers this week, Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. But afterwards there were gunshots, and it took a while to make sure everyone was okay. Oh no, exclaimed Jeremiah. I'm glad you're okay too. So am I, said Dad as he squeezed Jeremiah in his arms. So am I. Dad, what are all those blue ribbons for? Said Jeremiah as the family drove to church one Sunday. It looks like they're everywhere. Remember when Mom and I were downtown and someone started shooting? 5 Dallas police officers died that day, said Dad. It was very sad. The blue ribbons honor them. Jeremiah watched the endless blue ribbons passing by. He didn't want to talk anymore. Dad, what is this vigil for? Said Jeremiah one afternoon. What's a vigil? Asked Hope. Yeah, what's a vigil? Said Liberty. It's when people gather to remember someone who has died tragically, Mom told them. Daddy is speaking here tonight. Who died now? Asked Jeremiah in a frustrated huff. What happened? A young man named Jordan Edwards, said Dad. He was 15 years old and riding in a car when he was shot and killed by a police officer. That makes no sense at all, said Jeremiah. You're right, son, said Dad. You're right. But Jeremiah didn't want to talk anymore. In the car on the way home from the vigil, Jeremiah thought about all that he had seen and heard. He imagined Jordan, the Dallas police officers, Philando, Alton, the Charleston Nine, Michael, Trayvon, and others with names that he didn't know. Later that night, Jeremiah came into his parents' room. Mom, Dad, I'm ready to talk. Okay, son, said Dad, we're listening. Jeremiah took a deep breath. I am tired of people hurting each other. I'm tired of people shooting each other. I'm tired of people killing each other. I am tired of people hating each other just because they are different or because of the color of their skin. You know what, said Dad? We're tired of that too. Is there anything we can do about it? Asked Jeremiah. We're trying to, said Mom, and we believe that one day things will change. That's why we vote, said Dad. That's why we march in the streets, said Mom. That's why we pray, said Dad. That's why we organize people in our community, said Mom. That's why we speak out against injustice, said Dad. That's why we give money to important causes, said Mom. That's why we write books and articles, give lectures and interviews, said Dad. That's why we love those around us, said Mom. Jeremiah, every day there are people working to make this world a better place for you and your sisters and many others, and we are working with them, said Dad. When we look at you and your sisters and all your friends, we have great hope for the future. We believe that your generation can work to change the world too. Jeremiah thought about that. It's like my hair. You told me my locks would take a long time. I just had to wait and believe, and with a little help, it happened. His parents smiled. Yes, it happened. I know I can't vote yet, but I will, said Jeremiah. If you let me, I can march. I can already pray, and I'll keep praying. And I can give some of my birthday money to someone who needs it. And when I see something wrong, or if I see someone hurt or bully someone else, I can speak up and get help. I can change the world. Yes, you will, son, said Dad. We know you will, said Mom. Jeremiah lifted his head, his long locks dangling, and proclaimed, Yes, we will.
Thank you, Marcy. I love the books that you pick out. And welcome to all of you. I'm Katie Seifert, the Director of Music Ministries, and I'm glad you are here and to be with you on this Memorial Day. Let's join together in heart and mind in song, singing with our choir. This is the last choir video in a series done this spring where Benji Messer, the music director from UU Central Phoenix, and I have led a choir together we call the Arizona Unitarian Universalist Video Choir. This choir is made up of our choir and many other UUs around the state who have all braved new technology because it is simply better to sing together virtually than to not sing together at all. Directing this project gave me the gift of diving deep into the words, your faces, and singing of our choir members that truly created medicine to my soul. Thank you to Sam Plattner, Izzy Hyman, and our singing choir. Today we remember not only the men and women who died while serving our military, but also the lives lost in the Tulsa Massacre and the Battle of Guernica. We sing the powerful words and hopeful melody from the African American spiritual that reminds us that there is more love always somewhere.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere.
Hello again, and welcome to Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation. Thank you for joining us this morning, as we are not whole without each and every one of you. We're glad you're here to worship with us on this Memorial Weekend, and we welcome you no matter your age or able-bodiedness, your spiritual beliefs or religious background, no matter your family, economic status, or political affiliation. No matter whom you love, believe us when we say you are welcome here. Everyone is welcome in this community. Wherever you are on your life's journey, we welcome you to this circle of love and community and to this sacred space. We offer a special welcome to anyone who is new to us and curious about Unitarian Universalism and Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation, and has chosen to join us this beautiful morning, or those of you viewing the recorded version. We're so pleased you're here, and we encourage you to stay after our service to chat. In our virtual pulpit today is our interim minister, the Reverend Dr. Fred Wooden. The title of his sermon is American Guernica, and it's about the centennial of the Tulsa Massacre. And earlier this week, while he was at home preparing for this service, at home in Michigan, I should say, Reverend Wooden recorded himself on Facebook Live while weeding his garden. He said something that inspired me, and I've been thinking about it ever since. He was talking about weeding and how it is satisfying in that one accomplishes a task, even though the weeds quickly return and the task begins again. One pulls the weeds and feels satisfied, and then the feeling is quickly overshadowed by the necessity of doing it all over again. So many things in life are like that. In fact, perhaps everything is like that, because balance is not static. Balance happens by staying aware of and continually making adjustments to return to balance. Some adjustments are big and some are small, but without them, we risk moving too far in one direction or the other, making the return to balance difficult. I happened to be performing a weeding task of my own while watching Reverend Wooden weeding his garden and reflecting on the simplicity and the satisfaction. I was uploading photos from my phone and then organizing them into folders on my laptop. I've done this particular weeding task a few times, but long enough ago that I had forgotten how to do it, which required a Google search and a few trial and errors to make it happen. It's not intuitive or straightforward in my case because I have an Apple iPhone and upload to a Windows laptop. And when Apple updates or window updates always remove a crucial setting required to make the upload happen smoothly or even at all. Trust me, the last time I did it, the exact same steps were required, and I promised myself I wouldn't let it happen again. But alas, I betrayed myself because let's face it, organizing photos and then deleting them from one's phone is a hassle. It's much easier to just keep clicking the photos and then forgetting about them than it is to look at them and go through the decision-making process of which to keep and which to delete. Perhaps exhausting is a better word. And then once the keepers are identified, what then? I don't know anymore, as I'm transitioning from hard copies and have not decided what to do as the options seem endless. Meanwhile, of course, I'm still clicking and filling up my phone again. This time, I promise I'm going to do it monthly. Maybe quarterly is a more reasonable goal. It seems we're in a similar situation culturally, becoming aware of the past and finding ways to build a society that is inclusive and welcoming to all. And I understand not everyone agrees with my objective, but it is happening nevertheless. All cultures have amnesia about historical horrors that destroy those who are marginalized, such as what happened with the Tulsa race riot. I remember last year when so many people learned about the tragedy in Tulsa for the first time and were horrified by it as it had been erased from accepted historical knowledge. I don't mean to minimize the task of remembering, but I'm thinking this process of becoming aware of horrific history is akin to weeding one's garden. It's a necessary task that is hard while it's happening, but which can result in a better place for all of us. In the case of cultural weeding, the learning is hard and the tendency is to resist accepting what happened and point fingers and find scapegoats to blame. But that is exhausting and not helpful for the growth of the whole garden, the whole society. Instead, we need to look at the history straight in the heart and not turn away from the violence. We need to find ways to accept it and become more vigilant and look for ways to right wrongs and return to balance so that when the next weed sprouts, as inevitably it will, we can pull it quickly and without the exhausting finger-pointing drama. It's the only way the human race can evolve and can one day reach a place where humans don't need to fight each other over the earth's finite resources. Blessed be.
I'm really grateful to Barbara that she brought up my yard. It's a tiny yard, and I'm in the part of it right now. And I'm standing underneath of my Japanese maple, perhaps my favorite tree in my yard. I can't take credit for it, though. It was here before I came. Every day we receive gifts that we're not paying attention to. The tree behind me with its new set of leaves and forming seeds, the sky, the earth itself, every breath is a gift. These are the gifts we receive without even thinking about them. There are gifts that we give without noticing, of being attentive to one another as we are in worship, of caring for someone sometimes when it's very difficult, of feeling sad and feeling glad. These are all gifts we give as well. And it's this economy of giving and receiving that really sustains us. And it's what makes life worth living. Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation receives and gives gifts too, ones that we cannot do individually. And by doing so, we make a place for people to gather and a voice that can be heard. And that's why when we ask for your support, it is to remember that it is the economy of giving that truly sustains us and our vision. So as I've said so many times, and the slide will remind you, click, call, text, email, whatever you can. Your gift to VUU amplifies the gift of you, not only to the community that is the congregation, but to the community that is Arizona, that is Michigan, that is everywhere we are. With gratitude for your gift to VUU, I welcome your gift as you as we enter into another day.
Now is our time for centering. Let's allow a moment of silence, 1 minute, for the many lives lost serving our country and the lives lost due to racism in our country and the shadows of our humanity. Let's breathe in and out, now sitting in the silence. Let's all take another breath, breathing in and out. Now, let's allow the song, Where Have All the Flowers Gone, to further center us and help us to arrive to this present moment on Memorial Day. You are welcome to sing along or enjoy the music however you enjoy the music.
Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? Girls have picked them, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn?
Where have all the young girls gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young girls gone? A long time ago. Where have all the young girls gone? Taking husbands, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn?
Where have all the young men gone?
Long time passing.
Where have all the young men gone?
Long time ago.
Where have all the young men gone? Gone for soldiers, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn?
And where have all the soldiers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the soldiers gone? Gone to graveyards, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn?
Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time passing. Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time ago. Where have all the graveyards gone? Covered with flowers, everyone. When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn?
Prayer, it's become easier to say, but it's still hard to talk about. But we do talk about spiritual practices. That's a little easier, and that's okay. My spiritual practice is walking. I do it every day. And I don't mean just a little bit, I mean a lot 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 miles a day. It's good for my heart. I mean, my actual physical heart. But it's good for my spiritual heart too. It's not that I chant mantras so much as the actual act of walking is a prayer. I'm sure I've told you about Rabbi Abraham Heschel, who joined Martin Luther King on the Edmund Pettus Bridge back in 1965 and said as he walked across the bridge, arm in arm with Dr. King and others, "Look, I'm praying with my legs." That's what we do, or what I do, when we move through life deliberately. Walking is my prayer, because around me, I see a world far larger than myself, and one that really doesn't notice me very much. The robins chatter loudly at each other. I can feel the wind against my face. The sun makes me squint. I'm reminded of my very small location on the planet, and that is a liberating moment. I sometimes think the most important thing we can do spiritually is to remember how tiny we are, not how important. We Unitarian Universalists have been lifting up human nature and human dignity and human potential forever. And I want to say, hey, slow down. We're not all that much. Maybe if we took a pause from our magnificence, we might feel a little better about the world and a little more humble about our place in it. Walking puts me back in my place. We all deserve to be put in our place, and I'm glad of it. To be put in your place gladly. That's what prayer is about. Whatever it takes for you to find that place, with your arms, with your legs, with your words, with your eyes, do that. Do it as often as you can. Because as Annie Dillard said, quit your tents, pray without ceasing. Get out there and start praying with your body, and you will find that your heart becomes lighter. Now I'll ask Katie to lead us into our special music.
I'd like to introduce you to Brian Hembree, who wrote and performed this next song, and he performs it live with his band Smokey and the Mirror. Brian is a resident of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I will let him introduce his song, Tulsa, 1921.
I grew up in Tulsa, and in 1921, which is very near the time frame of the play. The play happens in 1918. Well, in 1921 in Tulsa, the worst race riot in American history, the bloodiest race riot in American history happened in Tulsa, and it was 36 hours of hell. And basically, at the time, this is what they called the Black Wall Street. It was the most affluent African-American community in the nation, and 35 blocks of that community was burned to the ground by the other side of town. And so growing up there, I barely knew about it. It was kind of swept under the rug, and it was an undercurrent. You know, no one really talked about it. And so it took me about 15 years, and I wrote this song about the Tulsa race riot. It's called Tulsa 1921.
Shot rings out in the middle of the night. There's a dead man on Tulsa's north side. But there ain't nobody naming names. Just a newspaper man with an axe to grind. He says it's real simple, it goes like this. Black man gave a white woman a kiss. So let's rise up and let's burn him down. 'Cause there ain't no room for that night's town. This ain't about an embrace. It's just the age-old struggle to hold down a race. You had your Black Wall Street and millionaire Jews. Native nations worth billions in crude. Yeah, they all flowed with opportunity thick. There were too many people and they were getting rich. And with some folks that don't sit too well. So one day the axe it fell. Yeah, the mob crossed Greenwood and Archer bound. They burned the Baptist church to Zion down. They were shooting left and they were shooting right. Yeah, the fire blocked the stars in the sky. There was blood in the streets and bodies everywhere. The carnage left 35 blocks bare. And that paper said the dead were 23. But there were 500 missing families. Well, the folks left standing, they split fast. All those dreams they were building reduced to ash. Teachers, doctors, lawyers, and preacher men had seen their fair share of blood and sin. And there's this thing about history that they understood, telling them to leave town while they still could. So if you're in downtown Tulsa and you're looking around at all the empty lots where the highways laid down, with the semis and the cars passing through, you'll know that path was laid by a wrecking crew. And if you cross the tracks that separate that town, there's a mass grave buried in the ground. A disgrace they hid beneath the red dirt clay. You'll hear nothing but a whisper today.
So it was about 9 years ago, not quite, when I started taking long walks on purpose. I mean, really long walks, like many days in a row. And I discovered that's what my soul needed from time to time. That's what made me into a pilgrim. I realized that pilgrimage, whatever that means, is a practice I need to follow. My second pilgrimage, and I'll tell you about my first another time maybe, but my second one was in Spain, that famous place where you go across Spain to Santiago de Compostela. There are several paths, and I took one of the shorter ones because if you walk the whole thing, you start in the Pyrenees and it takes 4 to 6 weeks. And I don't have the time, the money, or the, shall we say, the forbearance of a good wife to let me go for that far and that long, and I don't blame her one bit. I did manage to walk for about a week, and afterward I went back to Madrid. And Madrid is perhaps second only to Paris for the density of its wonderful world-class art museums, including one called the Reina Sofia, the Queen Sofia Museum, which is in a former factory and houses Spanish 20th century and modern art, among others, but mostly that. And it's focused around one piece that, well, you can't see it directly right away. You have to go through some other rooms to read about it, to read and notice the studies and the preliminary sketches, to learn the history of the Spanish Civil War before you enter a room, and there in the room all by itself, 11 feet tall, 20 feet wide, is Picasso's Guernica. Guernica. He spells it with a C because that's the Spanish, but the town for which its name is spelled with a K. It is utterly transfixing. And I don't mean that in a glamorous sense. It is fierce. It is intense. You saw it in the prelude earlier in pieces. But I've got to tell you that if you've ever seen a piece of art in a book and then seen it in person, you know that the difference is, well, Mark Twain said the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and lightning bug. When you see a painting or a great piece of art in person, it is nothing like seeing it in a book or even on a screen. And I was riveted by the painting, by what it tried to do, by what it was saying. And I stood there moving back and forth for over an hour, just trying to absorb its presence. I just want you to think about that experience, which commemorated a single day in April of 1937. We're going to go earlier in time, because until recently, many Americans had no notion of the Tulsa race riot, which is the wrong thing to call it, because when we use the term race riot, we think of Black people rioting in the streets, which is exactly what that phrase is supposed to connote, but that's not what happened. It is more properly, more accurately, more honestly called the Tulsa Massacre, which took place over a period of 36 hours. It was Memorial Day weekend, in fact, which is why this is the 100th anniversary. And I'll give you a little bit of what happened, and I do mean a little bit. It seems a young man, 19-year-old fellow named Dick Rowland, who was a shoe-shining fellow, he was Black, was working that day, that Monday. And in Tulsa, as in so much of America, there were only limited places where he could relieve himself. And one of the few near him was on the top floor of the Drexel building. And in order to get there, he had to use the elevator. And in 1921, elevators were operated by people. And the elevator operator was a 17-year-old white girl named Sarah Page. And don't think this is going to turn into something salacious. It's not. When Mr. Rowland came back from the restroom and the door to the elevator opened, he hurried out of the elevator and out of the building. No one knows why. An employee of the store on the first floor looked toward the elevator and saw the elevator operator looking distraught. And because it was Oklahoma in the South, he asked if the Black person had assaulted her. She said no. But as the song implied, a local newspaper man reported an attempted sexual assault on a white girl by a Black boy. And so the police came to call upon him. And while he was never charged, and Sarah Page exonerated him the next day, he was arrested. And while he was under arrest, a white mob began to form at the behest of the same newspaper that had reported the inaccurate assault. And that white mob was going to lynch Mr. Rowland. But you see, something different happened this time. Black men from the Greenwood neighborhood, the Black Wall Street, decided to assist the sheriff in protecting Dick Rowland. Now, the sheriff said, no, I don't need any assistance, but they wouldn't go away because they were rightfully afraid of what would happen. Well, violence broke out between the group of Black men and the group of white men. Shots were fired, people died. And because of that, The next day, the white community began to gather on the edges of Greenwood along railroad tracks and invaded the neighborhood. At the end of it all, somewhere between 36 official and 300 unofficial people were dead. I can tell you more about the details. They are harrowing, but this is a sermon, not a history lecture. And what's more, there are documentaries you can see today and tomorrow that will give you those details. What I wish to say is that the Tulsa Massacre was the American Guernica with a K, a town assaulted, but there was no Picasso to remember that event. In fact, the event all but vanished, as you heard in the song, as you've probably heard in your lives. And that suppression of that memory is a crime almost equal to the massacre itself. Now, as I looked at both instances, I was surprised at some of the chillingly similar details. Guernica, with a K, is a Basque town very near the coast of the Bay of Biscay. During the Spanish Civil War, it was a Republican stronghold, as well as a Basque spiritual center. It held about 10,000 people, which is, about the same size as the Greenwood neighborhood in Tulsa. It was a meaningful cultural spot for that community, as was Greenwood, was a meaningful center of Black life for that culture in America. Monday, April 26th was a market day in Guernica. Tuesday, May 31st was a business day in Greenwood. In the late afternoon of 1937, the fascist forces, with the assistance of German and Italian armies, bombed the roads and bridges to prevent people from leaving town. On May 31st, 1921, white men gathered around the edge of this Greenwood neighborhood to prevent people from leaving. German and Italian bombing planes arrived and began to blanket the town with ordnance. Remember, this is not a town with an army in it. There were soldiers for the Republicans in the town, but not so many as to need a bombardment. And on the next day, after the first day of the massacre, private planes circled over Greenwood, dropping turpentine firebombs and firing weapons from above. John Hope Franklin, one of the great historians of Black history, was a Tulsan, and it was his father who witnessed the massacre, and he wrote about it, John Hope Franklin's father, writing in part, "Lurid flames roared and belched and licked their forked tongues into the air. Smoke ascended the sky in thick black volumes, and amid it all, the planes, now a dozen or more in number, still hummed and darted here and there with the agility of natural birds in the air. Planes circling in midair, they grew in number and hummed, darted and dipped low. I could hear something like hail falling upon the top of my office building. Down East Archer Street, I saw the old Midway Hotel on fire, burning from its top, and then another and another and another building began to burn from the top down. The sidewalks were literally covered with burning turpentine balls. I knew all too well where they came from, and I knew all too well why every burning building caught fire from the top. Accounts of both Guernica and Greenwood are incomplete and inconsistent. The fog of war hung over both, and the fog of propaganda followed them quite quickly. Guernica officially had less than 200 dead, but the number was likely much higher. Chillingly, about the same number were reported in Greenwood. In the aftermath of Guernica, the Nationalists took the town and hurriedly cleaned it up. In the aftermath of Tulsa, no one was convicted. The community all but fled, and the event was left out and eventually urban renewed. A New York Times article about the effort to recover the story that had been buried starts with these words. One spring evening in the early 1980s, Maria Brown, a Black nursing assistant in Tulsa retirement home, visited one of her favorite residents. He was a well-traveled white man in his 70s, and often sat and listened, and she often sat and listened to his stories. The day she asked about growing up in Tulsa, Ms. Brown remembers how he began. You know about the riot? He asked. She had lived in Tulsa for years, but she had no idea what he was talking about. The man continued. He said, I'll tell you what happened. When it came to the official history of Tulsa, for much of the 20th century, it was as if the massacre had never happened. We all know the old riddle that says, if a tree falls in the forest, did it really make a sound? White Tulsa kind of hoped that if they could keep people from hearing the tree fall, that there wouldn't be a sound. Of course, you all know that Tulsa was not unique. Other massacres took place. How about Meridian, Mississippi in 1871, the Colfax Massacre in Louisiana in April of 1873, the New Orleans Riot of 1866, the Memphis, Tennessee Riot of 1866, the Charleston, South Carolina Riot of 1876, and the Wilmington, South Carolina Riot of 1898. These were all race riots. Remember, that's a lie. They're massacres. And that's just to mention a few. Some of you may have heard of Rosewood, Florida, which used to exist, or Thibodaux, Louisiana. In a sense, whole forests of trees have been felled. Black trees and Native American trees, killed, knocked down, felled, burned, cleared, and forgotten. Guernica, of course, was supposed to be forgotten. Just a statistic, a line in an official report, until Pablo Picasso used his art to portray the falling bombs, the terror, to shout the sound of a tree that had fallen so it would not go unheard and forgotten. And that's my point this morning, not to get you to care about the riot or the massacre, but to care about the silence that followed. Because there has been no great artworks like the Guernica to force us to pay attention to Tulsa or Meridian or Thibodaux or Colfax. And this Memorial Day, ironically, paradoxically, is the time we should pause and remember. Yes, let's remember those who gave their lives in uniformed service in wars that should never have happened, in wars that had to happen. I believe that's a truly noble thing we must do. And sometimes when we do it, it gives their lives and deaths meaning. When we do that, it's an old and powerful custom. And sometimes when we remember the dead who fell in wars, we are changed by the remembering. Gary Wills has written a book about how Lincoln's Gettysburg Address literally changed the way we thought about America, and he gave that as a commemoration of a cemetery for those who died at Gettysburg. Remembering those who died for a nation is not only essential, it is potentially salvation for the nation that remains. But it's not only soldiers and sailors who die for their country. Millions of Black and brown Americans, natives, immigrants, and women have died who believed in America, but were not allowed to live because of fear and hatred. And they too are worthy of our memory. In October of 2019, I went down to Selma, Alabama. I went then because I had a few days to myself, and I took one of my long walks. I decided that because I was too young to be there in 1965, only barely, but I was too young, I would go and see that place, Selma. And what's more, I would walk as they did all the way from Selma to Montgomery. It's only 50 miles. I did it over 4 days. It was not hard. But you see, this was more than like going to Spain or any other of those pilgrimages I had taken so far. In this case, I had a personal stake. My intern supervisor, now retired and living in Tucson, was there in 1965. A member of my church in Brooklyn, now deceased, was there in 1965. It was there that Jim Reeb, Unitarian Universalist minister, with his friends Orloff Miller and Clark Olson, were assaulted, and Jim died. And I knew Clark. And so I said, I've really got to go and see this place. I've got to be there, put it in my bones, the way my walking is in my bones. So I went down there and took myself to Selma. And before I started, I went to the museum the National Park Service has created right next to the bridge. It's a really good museum, and I urge you to go. And it details the history up to that point. It's very complicated. It's much more subtle, and it's much more inclusive than the stories most of us hear. I spent a long time there, as I did in front of the painting in Spain, looking at the photographs, reading everything. And as I was leaving, I went down to the desk where the park rangers are there, and they asked me where I was from, and I said, well, I'm from Michigan, but I'm here because of some friends of mine. In fact, I wrote in my diary that day, and here's what I wrote. As I stood at the desk, I mentioned what I was doing and how it was how I was there to honor those who had marched, including one of those three who had been with Jim Reeb. And as I started saying that, I began to choke up. I began to weep. And I realized at that moment that I was not there just to honor them. I was not there just to remember them. I was there to make some kind of contrition, to apologize for not being there, even though I couldn't have been there, for being sorry that it happened, for regretting that I lived in a country where that sort of thing can happen. And then I remembered that all pilgrimages are pilgrimages of contrition. You walk to Santiago, to Rome, to wherever, to make amends. I'm beginning to think America needs to make a pilgrimage like that. Because unless your heart breaks, you have not heard the tree fall in the forest. Unless your heart breaks, you have not heard the crash of destruction. In my little town that I served, the little town I served first when I became a minister 41 years ago, there was always a Memorial Day observance. And I always took part because ministers have to pray. Well, you know what goes on. At any rate, 25 years later, we went back. I had Memorial Day off and we were up there visiting. And so we happened to be in that same town on Memorial Day when it was observed. And so this time I wasn't the minister, I was just part of the crowd. And there were all the men who had served, men I knew, now 25 years older, now very old indeed. And what I remember most, I remember Richard most. Richard was already over 80, but there he stood up front with all the other men. wearing their old uniforms. He had an Eisenhower bomber jacket thing, and he had his campaign cap on, and he stood rock-ribbed and rigid. And I could tell as he stood there, he was remembering every battle he was in, and every friend he lost, and every colleague who was wounded. And again, I began to weep. Weep not with some horrible regret, but with the knowledge that I was there because they had been before me. That we were making a solemn witness of the loss, not the gain. Welcome, tears. And so I'm asking you, not you personally, but us as a society, what will make us weep in that way? Weep for not just those who have fallen in war, but for those who died at Greenwood and Rosewood and Thibodeau and Colfax, at Wounded Knee, and all the other places where lives were wasted in order for us to be America. We use the word remembering so much that we forget it means to put together, to put back into wholeness, to put it into oneness. To remember is to recollect, to collect things again. And if we are afraid of collecting up the bad and the sad and the hard and the cruel, we are incomplete. And I maintain that unless we can own the sadness, own the loss, own the weeping and the sorrow as well as the victories, if we can own the defeats as well as the gains, we will not be complete as a nation, and therefore we will not be able to move forward as a nation. Without our sorrow, without our contrition, our tears, the hope of America cannot move forward. We are stuck here. Much as someone in grief who denies the loss never moves on. I pray for an American Guernica, a painting, a song, a poem, a speech that will summon from us as a nation the depth that we need to plumb in order to be whole. I long for something that summons our collective sorrow for all that has been lost, that we can remember it all, hard as it is, that our tears in their way may bring new life to a land that is parched right now by fear and anger and doubt. This may not be the uplifting sermon you wanted, but it is the sermon that I needed to give me. Words from a great poet come to mind. Our dreams need our sorrow to come to life, because becoming often waits the nourishment of tears. If we would become the nation we believe we should be, we must admit to being the nation that we should not be. Grieve it, regret it, confess it. Remember in every sense of the word. And perhaps then, that tree that is growing from the stump will grow again and grow as great and as tall and as green as our hopes have always wanted. With that hope in mind and that sorrow in our hearts, I invite Katie to lead us forward through the end of our worship with this next hymn.
Let's take 3 big breaths together, allowing each breath to quiet our minds, relax our bodies, ground our feet or our seat, feeling the strength of the floor or the
I'd like to share with you, before we extinguish the chalice, words from my late colleague, Ralph Helverson. We have religion when we stop deluding ourselves that we are self-sufficient. When we hold some hope beyond the present, when we have some abiding gratitude for all that we have received, when we have done all that we can, and then entrust ourselves to the life that is larger than ourselves. There may be more to religion than this, but if it is only this, it is enough. And with that small truth in hand, I invite Barbara Face to extinguish the chalice and conclude this time of worship together.
Please join me in saying our Extinguishing the Chalice blessing. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again. And now, please feel free to stay for a small group chat by simply accepting the breakout room invitation when it appears. Alternatively, for anyone who wants to meet and chat with the minister, simply decline the breakout room invitation. We hope you have a lovely and safe rest of your Memorial weekend. Blessed be.